Okay, now we're live. It says you are live.
Okay, there you go.
We're live. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Good morning, everyone. So we're here with Conscious Conversations, and we're kind of carrying on a conversation that Natalie and I started earlier in April um, about um, about natural consequences, versus punishment. Like when we're parenting our kids and we're disciplining our kids, and looking at what does that look like consciously, right? How are we allowing natural consequences? How do you do that? What are natural consequences? And we are programmed a certain way at the consciousness of our parents, and that often includes this reward punishment kind of model of parenting, of disciplining. And so we have Julie joining us today, which is so exciting. And yeah, so we're just diving back into that conversation because there's so much, I think, to talk about. And Natalie, it's interesting you shared that video with me in this group. You
Yeah.
shared the Eckhart Tolle video, and I loved that. I loved what he was talking about, presence, right? That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's
We
about
try and
being
make it
present.
so complicated,
Yes.
and we
Yes.
just have to just focus on you being in that moment, and that is enough, and to trust that that's enough, right?
Yes. And how many times do we say this, right?
Yeah.
It's
How many
just
times do we say it to ourselves,
all the
right?
time. I needed the reminder. Like the video was so helpful. It was a really great
Yeah.
reminder
It
of
was
presence.
funny, yeah. Because I opened up YouTube and boop, it was there. It always happens to me with YouTube. There's like the first video, it's always something that I need to see, right?
Yeah,
And then I'm
yeah,
like, oh, and I'm like, oh, and we're having our conversation tomorrow morning. So
that's
it just,
perfect.
yeah.
That's perfect.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone who's joining us. Hopefully, some of you can come on live. We're kind of coming in at a different time right now. But I'm Angie Mallory. If you haven't met me, I am the creator of this space, Journey to Soul, and I'm an intuitive EFT tap spiritual coach and EFT tapping practitioner. And yeah, I just love having these conversations. I love bringing people together through community and sharing wisdom. This is why I love the conscious conversations, because we get to share wisdom, we get to share knowledge, we get to share our own insights, and we get to grow together as we're having the conversation, because it always activates new awarenesses within each of us, right? And so the more people we can even bring on, I'm really excited to have three of us on here today. It's great. And so, yeah, I'll let Natalie introduce herself to you.
Yeah. Good morning, guys. My name is Natalie. Obviously, Natalie Clark. Or the camera's weird. I was trying to be clever and it didn't work. um, so I've been on the spiritual journey for a while now, a few years, and the last couple of years I've been homeschooling my kids, which has just brought like another deeper dimension to my spiritual growth, which was actually really surprising. And I actually work with homeschool families to help them through all like the hurdles or the challenges, because I find when you start homeschooling, you also start questioning how you parent, right? Because it just flows together, and if you don't let that flow together, if you're like, no, I need to parent like the old way I was parenting, but do like this new homeschool thing, well, that's where you often get like, the struggles, or this isn't working, or all this conflict. So I really help parents kind of like untangle all that crap.
It's a big weave of tangles, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you, Julie.
Hello, I'm Julie, and I'm a mother of two fantastic boys who are 10 and 12. And I've been conscious of wanting to be a parent since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. um, and really started planning out how I wanted to parent even in my teen years. Like I wrote pages of how I wanted to parent. And a lot of that had to do with natural consequences and, how I was going to teach them in a loving way rather than a fearful way, which was kind of how I grew up, like the fear of punishment, the fear of being
Yeah.
spanked, just the fear of being wrong, right? And doing something wrong. So I didn't want that for my children. I wanted them to be conscious of their choices, and understand how each of their choices led them in a different direction. So, yeah, that's me. I did homeschool for 3 years. My children are back in school for the first time this year. They requested to go back, so it's their life, and I try to allow them to live it how they choose, with being their guardian and just trying to keep them safe and healthy and hopefully happy. So that was a big decision to allow them to go back to school. But yeah, so that's me and my parenting in a nutshell.
Amazing. Yeah, so I've been, ever since our conversation in early April, I've really been even more conscious, right, of that idea of like the programming of reward and punishment. And
Yeah.
you know, it's interesting. I see how many times it slips out of my mouth, you know? Like, and I have to stop myself because it'll be like, no, then you're not going to get this, you know? And it's like, and I realize how much I say it, and I'm starting to see that I'm not going to follow through on that though. Like, it just slips out of my mouth, and I think to myself right away, I'm like, oh no, that I'm not going to take that away from them. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it's been a really interesting journey of just observing. And I feel like the last month has just been observing, and I'm noticing how much it comes, especially
Yeah.
when our internal like conflict with, like, if we're triggered or whatever, we're emotionally reacting, right? That's when it really comes out.
Yeah, I definitely find that too. I'm definitely at sometimes becoming the observer in the situation and thinking, "Oh, what did I just say? I didn't I didn't mean that. Take it back," because I'm really big on having clear, consistent consequences as well. So, if I say something, I want to be able to follow through. And I've been noticing that with myself lately too, thinking, you know what, I keep um, saying I'm going to do something, but then not following through. And then that just throws the whole dynamics of everything off, because then our children can't trust what we're saying. They can't, So yeah, it can definitely be challenging at times.
Yeah.
So being very conscious of what I'm going to say before I say it is very important. And it's not about punishment, it's about the consequences, right? There are consequences to all of our actions, and I do want to teach them that. So something I've done since the time they were, very, very little, is give them either a calm down or a time out. So if they just need time to calm down their emotions, I'm not going to put a time on it. Let's go, you can go over here and have some time. I can sit with them if they want me to, or they can have space if they want space. But when it comes to the time outs, that is a consequence for a behavior, but it's important to discuss that afterwards. So we always have a discussion afterwards of, what choice did you make to get you here? And if you don't want to come back, what choice will you make, next time, moving forward, if you don't want this same situation to happen? So it's really putting it in their hands and making them conscious that their choices do have a consequence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love how you brought that up, because that was actually something that our family therapist was telling us, is you have to close that circle, right? So there's that, the event, whatever that is, and then the consequence of the punishment or whatever. But then you also have to close that circle of like how you said, like having that conversation afterwards. And I think this is where I struggle personally. And I think a lot of people struggle with it too, because especially depending how you grew up, maybe there wasn't a conversation. It's just like, you behave this way and that's it. Like a very English words escaping me, but like very like strict, like this is how you behave. There's no other, like, this is it. There's no other. And then you're just like, okay, so then you go up to your room, right?
Yeah.
And then like you're grounded or whatever. But then there was no conversation afterwards of choices.
Mhm.
And that's why a lot of adults don't
Don't
realize they
know.
have choices because they were never
Yes.
taught that. So I love that you're bringing this up of having the conversation afterwards once, you know, the child's calmed down, or whatever,
And
like
I've
helped
calmed
clean
down.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you've calmed down. Yeah, yeah, like giving space, right? Because it's in that space where those choices can come from, right? Because if you're crowding over someone, like, you know, like someone gets injured, or, you know, like everybody's crowding around, well, like, let the person breathe, right? Give them
Yeah.
space. Same thing with this, like, and sometimes it's just space of, let's not keep having this, like, stop talking about what they did wrong, just like verbal space and also physical space, right? And it's important for parents to have that too. And then again, having that conversation of, you know, okay, like, this is the choice that you made. Next time this, you know, if the situation comes up again, what do you think you can do differently? Or what's a different thing? And that's something, and it's not going to change. Well, it may change overnight for some people, but it may not.
Mhm.
And it's repetition, and it's also giving space, because we also have to remember, guys, that our awesome children are their own, they're their own person, they're their own beings. They have their own path. So it may not jive with them. They may literally just not be at the spot in their path where they can really take in that information and transform into something else. But that's okay, because you're giving them seeds, right? You're giving them seeds to plant. Maybe they'll use this again. You're giving them tools, just like we're given, you know, these divine spiritual tools, but we may not know necessarily how to use them, right? Same thing on the opposite end. You're offering someone these tools. You're offering your kids these tools of choices, of different ways to change their behaviors, or different ways of viewing the world. They may not know how to use that yet. Maybe it'll be 30 years from now, and then it'll click, and they'll be like, oh, damn, mom always talks about this, right?
How many times have we go through that too ourselves? Like, I think Julie will laugh at this, like mindfulness, right? Like 8 months of learning about it, totally getting it, like, but 8 months later, something just clicking it all into place, right? And I love that you bring that up, because I think we have to give our children that benefit of the doubt that they too will awaken to it in a moment, right? And so how many times, like, think about what our experience was, right? It was just hammered into us what we did wrong. You were saying that, like yeah, they just kept telling us what we did wrong, and then didn't give us the close of that loop, like didn't give us the information about choice, and that our choice led to that. And without that information, we were left to our own devices to make assumptions about what happened, because we really didn't think we were doing anything wrong, you know?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I often just came to the assumption that I was a bad person.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just a bad person because I didn't feel I did anything wrong. I didn't know what I did wrong. But clearly, I'm just not a good person because I'm being told what I'm doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
So obviously I'm fundamentally wrong.
Right. And no conversation about, oh, I do have choices, or, you know, where that can go. And I just wanted to point out that with this process, you know, as my children get older, especially, very often they want to talk about the situation immediately because they want it to be over. Right. I always did the 1 minute per year for the timeouts. So like if they're 2, it's 2 minutes. If they're 3, it's 3 minutes, and so on. And now they're 10 and 12. Often now I'll just do, okay, 5 minutes. And if we've calmed enough and we can talk about it, then we'll move on from there. Rather than the 10 and the 12. But sometimes I'll be like, no, I just want to talk about it now. I just want to get it over. But it's too emotionally reactive at that time.
Yes.
And I often just say to them, you know, I need time to calm down too. You know, I need to be able to think straight because we're becoming reactive and not responsive to the situation. So that time in that space is so valuable and important, giving us time to think about our choices. And that's what I always tell them, you know, it's time for us to sit and think about what our choices are, and then we can discuss it at the end.
And I love that includes us too. We need time. because our choices too are automatic, right? Like we have automatic choices, and it's really important. And that's what I say too to my kids is I'll put a timer on. Like often when it comes to doing any kind of school work, like we work on spelling. That's our focus for our homeschool when it comes to like worksheets or that type of thing, right? And so whenever we sit down, there's a lot of resistance with Alice. But when we start to get heightened, when it starts to get heightened now, I'm immediately like, not that anyone's doing anything wrong. I just say, I think I'm going to give us 5 minutes because I'm starting to get annoyed and it won't be helpful, you know, and I can tell that you're starting to get a little upset. So let's just take a 5 minute break before it gets out of hand and we're too emotional about it. And usually by the time we come back to it, she's perfectly fine and we just move forward with what we were doing. But it's taken a lot of work, right? We talk about it takes practice. Like it's taken a lot of work for me to get to this place where I can sense it happening before it blows up. It used to blow up.
Yeah.
But when it blows up, how many, like, I'm sure this has been your experience too, is like when it blows up and they're telling you everything you did wrong, like, and like, you know what I mean? You can't, or they're trying to teach you in that moment what was the right way or whatever, right? You can't take that information in when you're in fight or flight. Your nervous system's on fire. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really important point that you brought up. So while you guys were talking, the word grace came in. To do this with grace, guys. And maybe some of us didn't start parenting this way, right? Like some of us did, like Julie, but some of us didn't. Some of us are just, I mean, for me, it was really the last couple of years where I'm like, the way I'm parenting is not jiving with what I'm transforming into. And there's a learning curve. And it's really uncomfortable, especially if there's another parent in the house. It's fucking uncomfortable, let me tell you. But we got to remember, we got to start making this habit of being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right. And I really want to come back to this piece of grace, like do this with grace, which means like, to me, when I say that, it's like do this with like a loving forgiveness to your children and to yourself. And know that it takes a lot of time to get to where you want to be, of just natural consequences of your children, just having a better concept of natural consequences. It's going to take time because it's a new habit that you're developing as a parent. And you're teaching your child to replace one habit of maybe aggressive reaction, changing that habit to something a bit more productive, a bit more, less aggressive, right? So you're replacing one thing with another, and it's completely possible. You can do it, but you got to give yourself grace. You got to give yourself time. Some people may be more resistant to it than others, right? And this is where it's really important to actually like stay in your lane, like more focus on you than how other people are reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had mentioned something like this, Angie, when you were sharing your story. And it's, like when the child's like trying to teach you, well, whatever it is, whether it's, what you did wrong or whatever it is, that teaching moment, sometimes like our fight or flight may like come up, or our defense mode, like no, I'm right because I'm the mom, and or I'm this or I'm that, or I'm like 40 and you're 5, like all these things. So catch yourself, because that is ego. That's ego trying to defend itself. So I had a great, one of my mentors gave me a great visualization of like, just put like a metal box, like over that ego, over the mind. That's like, blah, 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 blah. Put a metal box over it. So just shut it up. Right. And not in an aggressive way though. But anyways, I don't want to get too deep on this, but just notice how you're reacting to your child when they're like in your face, or they're like, but you said I could have this, or, I did clean the kitchen, or whatever, like whatever it is, notice inside yourself, like, whoa, how am I reacting? right? And then keep doing that, because that's actually the key to like transforming behaviors in your family, because it all so much of it stems from your point of view. Because the more calm you are, and I've discovered this in the last month of like, I've realized how tight my body is. Like, notice how like tight you get, like it's like fight or flight, right? Like your muscles tighten up and your shoulders rise up and you scrunch up your face and you're like, you're glaring and stuff. Literally just like relax your body. And I do that when I hear like arguments in another room. I'll catch myself and I'm like, oh, like I'm getting really tense. I will relax and I'll keep telling myself, just relax, 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 relax. And then you know what? It starts quieting it down. And I'm like, dude, this is like freaking magic. Like, this is magic, right? So the biggest part of this is what's going on inside of you. So especially when it comes to that reward and punishment mentality that we all have, because this has been ingrained in humans since day one, guys. And we are moving out of that. And just hearing your stories, it's just like, let's just take a step back, guys, and see like we're doing something so new of, again, bringing back that more natural consequences, but bringing consciousness into it, right?
Yes.
And we are really the first generation of parents to really like take this in hand and do this consciously. There's been parents before, there's been families before that have been more leaning towards natural consequences. But this is really like we're like the first generation of parents to really do this. And this is what transformation looks like in the beginning. It's not like, snap your fingers and poof, we're in like, the Garden of Eden or whatever. Like, it gets a little ugly, just like childbirth, right? It's not like the stork comes and like gives you like this freshly scrubbed baby. It's like, no, there's blood and poop and there's like all this gross stuff, right? So that's what transformation looks like in the beginning. But like, it's so important and it's so amazing that we are even doing this consciously, that we're like really stepping out and being like, let's figure out this natural consequence and let's figure this out together.
And we're sharing it. Yeah, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Because even though there might have been conscious parents in the generation before us, they weren't sharing it. It wasn't something we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Definitely not nearly as much as I would like, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's nice when people come before us and share.
Yeah.
So we can learn from their experiences.
That's why grace is so important with ourselves, because we don't have that. We're forging the path.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something else about natural consequences. So a couple of things that have happened recently are no rain boots on a rainy day. So my son didn't want to wear his boots to school. And I was like, well, you might not want to have wet feet all day. And sure enough, he came home with wet feet. He's like, I'm never doing that again. Right? And it didn't have to be a situation. It didn't have to be me arguing with him to put his boots on, me trying to be the teacher. The natural consequence was the teacher. And it's the same with coats. Like, I've never really pushed them too much to wear that, because I just assume they will naturally learn. If they are uncomfortable, then next time they'll grab their coats. But I still, just like any parent, be like, you might want a coat, you might get chilly.
Yeah, or do you want to grab it and put it in your backpack or put it in the trunk? Yeah.
Yeah, and still sometimes I'm like, just take it, please. Just please.
Yeah. Can you just do that? I do that too. I do that too.
Flurries today. Please.
It would make me feel better if you just did that.
Right? But see? Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about us.
Because we give meaning to it. If my kid goes to school and it's 0 degrees and they don't have a coat,
they'll be
what
judged.
are they going to think of me? Judged. The teachers are going to be like, your mom didn't tell you to bring your coat, right? We give meaning to things.
I don't actually see it that way for myself, like of other people judging or anything. But the way I see it is, I just want them to be warm if they want to be warm. And also, the next thought just flew right out of my brain there, but it'll come back if it's meant to. What was that?
Yeah. I love that. I love that example. Like, that was the back when we did this video in April, you had shared that teal swan video, and she had talked about that natural consequence with the boots, right? Going in the snow. And it's like, yeah, it's true. Like, and that actually softened me, because I do that a lot where I'm trying to micromanage their experience.
That was the thought. It was keeping them healthy and safe. So I kind of put that as my job as their parent. I'm here to keep you healthy and safe. And that's when my decisions will overrule your decisions, right? Because growing up with because I'm the parent, really didn't rub me the right way. Growing up, I was so frustrated, right? Like, what's that even mean? Who,
Yeah, that hierarchy, right, of authority figures. Like, who made that up, right?
And I believe we're equal, and we both have value, and we both have, so like I said, back to when I was a teenager, this was something that I came up with. The whole timeouts with the discussing the choices. I actually came across a paper I wrote in high school that said this is how I wanted to parent going forward, and then realized that I did that as a babysitter and as a nanny, and I hadn't even realized I'd been doing it that long, practicing for when I had my own children. But I lost my train of thought again. Where's my train of thought going today? Keeps going in one ear and out the next.
I wanted to share an experience. If it pops in, just jump in. But I had an experience actually with that with keeping them healthy and safe. Like, I learned that from you, Julie. And the kids know that's my number one job. So here's the thing. So I think about as parents, like, sometimes we don't always make the best choice, right? And we let our kids do something because we don't want to fight. We don't want, you know what I mean? So we just do it. But here's something that has happened. So I would let the kids ride their bike on our street without a helmet, right? Alice has sensory issues, right? She doesn't like things touching her. So we were going to go take a bike ride in the neighborhood. And so I told her she had to wear her helmet, right? And she didn't. Like, the moment I put it on and it was uncomfortable, that was it. She didn't want anything to do with it. And she wore it before. Like, she wore it a couple of weeks ago, no problem, didn't complain about anything, right? But now she's got it in her head. She doesn't want to wear it. It was a struggle, and I'd be interested to hear what you say. So we were sitting out on the porch, and I told her, well, here's the boundary. If we're leaving off of our street, because she's like, you've never really made me wear it, she's yelling at me. So it's, I have to check my reaction, because my reaction is like, I already feel a little bit of shame that I haven't been consistent there. And she's throwing it in my face. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, but I have a boundary now, because I don't feel good about that. I don't feel good that I was letting you not do it without wearing a helmet. And I was like, and now I'm comfortable with it on our street when it's just here on the sidewalk. And I was like, but we're going out there. And I was like, so you have to wear the helmet. And then I told her she didn't want to wear the helmet. And I said, okay, then we can't take the bike. We can still go, but we can't take the bike. Right? And then she started getting mad. She's like, you can't force me. You can't force me to wear a helmet. It's my body. And so I started to bring up what's my number one job? My number one job is to keep you safe and healthy. And here's what I know. You have a bigger bike now. And I was like, and you're riding faster on that street. And the injury can be so bad, And I was like, and I can't in good conscience let you go without, and maybe I've let you before. And I'm like, but I'm allowed to change my mind. And I'm allowed to set a boundary now. And I'm like, so moving forward, this is what we're going to do. But it was awful. Like, she had a temper tantrum like a 2-year-old. And it was on her birthday too. I felt awful. But she was just crying. And then she'd be like, fine, I'll wear it, And then we go to put it on. And again, she'd start freaking out because it's tight or it's not fitting right. She wouldn't even give me a chance to put it on, right? To get it adjusted. And so we didn't go anywhere. She ended up just crying and being upset. And she told me I was being unfair. So that's a tough position. And I'm sure a lot of parents can relate when they try to start setting boundaries that maybe they weren't setting before.
And I think that's a beautiful lesson for her as well, to see that, you know what, maybe I made a choice in the past that doesn't feel quite right any longer. And now I can make a new choice that feels better for me. So I think that's, even though it feels yucky in the moment, it's still a great lesson and a great seed that was planted through that experience.
Thank you. That's helpful to see.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because it felt awful to be in it.
Yeah, yeah. I love your point, Julie. Yeah, because it was in the moment, it seemed like it was about the bike helmet,
Yeah.
but really you were showing, and when you verbalize it the way you did, that's really beautiful because again, that's giving space for your child to change your mind and be like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to have boundaries, even though I didn't have boundaries before, right? And that is such an important lesson. And again, even if it doesn't sink in, that's okay. Because you don't need to like, and I find I did this often. I would over explain myself.
Oh, yeah.
And I've stopped doing that. It's like, this is it. Like, it just exactly like your story, like how you explained it to your daughter. There you go. And then you don't have to add anything, even though you feel like you need to like continue arguing your point, right? Kind of like debate class where you just like have to keep talking to win, right? Maybe that's where it stems from. I don't know. That just came in. But just give them space, right? And then, yeah, next time she'll be like, maybe next time she won't be as, maybe there'll be a different outcome, right? Maybe it'll be, I don't know, maybe a different helmet will come in, or maybe, you'll adjust the helmet like a couple days before going on the bike ride. So the emotions aren't as intense, right? All these different outcomes can come out of that because that original situation was different, right? Because you, not only did you stick to your boundary, but you also, like when you explained it to her, you're also explaining it to yourself. Because I don't know if that happens to you often. I'll say something to my kids of, and sometimes it's even like trying to explain something that they're doing, right? Or like change their behavior or give them different options about choices. And then as I'm listening to myself talking, I'm like, that's good advice that I'm giving myself too, right?
Yep.
That's the beauty of parenting, right? We're constantly
reflecting it.
Yeah.
Through our interactions with our children. And I think, as Natalie was saying, the experience will change moving forward. And it really is teaching her that you can set and maintain healthy boundaries as well, and boundaries that feel aligned and right for yourself, even if you haven't in the past. So.
And in the end, it feels good. Like now that I'm beyond the experience, it feels good because that boundary does align with my values. That boundary does align with what I feel, right? And now because I've taken that step of discomfort, right? And made that boundary and followed it through. And it sucked. We didn't get to go to the park. Leah really wanted to go, you know what I mean? But she wouldn't walk. And she had to ride the bike. And I told her she had to wear the helmet and she couldn't do it. And so in the end, it sucked in the moment. But in hindsight, like I feel good about that boundary I made. And that was the thing. Before, I wasn't setting that boundary and I was just letting them kind of do what they want because I didn't want to fight. And I didn't feel good about it the whole time, though, right? Like I didn't feel good. I wanted her to wear the helmet because my number one job is her health and safety.
Yeah.
It's funny, a lot of time with parenting too, like, and I see this between Steve and myself, when it comes to feeling good parenting, a lot of the time, my choices and decisions may not feel good in the moment of, everyone feels great and happy. But moving forward and being aligned with my soul and my truth and my values, it feels good. So I find a lot of the time with, Steve, for example, he wants the feel good in the moment. Let's just, let it go. And I'm thinking about, future consequences and, moving forward, what that will be. So actually, we were just talking about this last night, and I was saying, a lot of the time in my parenting, I'm really focusing on the consequences for the future and what this means now. So it may not feel good in this present moment, but I think it's very valuable. Where a lot of the time he wants to feel good in the moment, and it doesn't matter what the future consequences are. And a lot of, with our personal dynamic, a lot of that has to do with unhealthy foods, junk foods. That's something he's passionate about giving children. He's so passionate about it. Like it's, or certain media that I don't think is healthy for their brain development, or the amount of media that I don't think is healthy for their brain development. And he just sees it as like a feel-good bonding time, right? So it's really about finding that balance. And it's funny, we were saying, he's like, I feel like I need to give them extra because you're so strict, kind of. And I'm like, I feel like I need to be so strict because you just give them so much extra. And I want to be the fun one sometimes too. And I want to, so it's really finding that balance between us where we can support each other and not feel like we have to go to the opposite extremes to give our children what we want to give them and we feel is important for them. He just sees it, like I said, is, a feel-good time. He remembers to his childhood when he got the candy and the chips and he got to watch the movies and all of this. And I try to say, I understand that, like in your life, it didn't happen very often, but you're giving it to them so often that it's expected. It's not out of the norm and a big deal for them because it's something that they have all the time. But he just relates it back to his childhood about how special it was. And he wants them to have that same special feeling, right? And I look at it like, I want them to have a healthy body and a healthy mind, and if it was less often, it would be special. Yeah. But that's not what you're creating for them right now. So it's really finding that balance between, for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I always find it interesting how families come together and all and maybe it's just because we're like ourselves, we're a family of 4. So I really see like that, like the different mix of personalities, but the similarities between certain family members. And this came in strong the other day of, that's what it's all about. Like parenting and just this life experience is about finding that balance because this life wasn't made to be perfect, right? It's to find that balance, however that looks like in your experience, right? So maybe it's disciplining, the kids are teaching them natural consequences. And maybe the one parent is, really stuck on doing it a certain way, even though, and that doesn't jive with you, right? So it's like, how do you find that balance? And how do you also, again, stay in your lane? Let that, and it's so difficult because I don't know what it is about parenting, right? But and especially when it's a couple parenting together in the same household, there's just a different level of challenges, right?
Right. So things that are coming up as you're saying this to me are, first of all, I keep it in my head that it's very valuable for our boys to have more than one experience as well, because they're learning from both sides, right? So that's really helped me to calm it down and be like, okay, this is dad's time. He's got control of this time. I may not necessarily agree with what he's doing, but I've had to remove myself completely from the situation. So
I'm not freaking out. Go hug a tree. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So like, okay, just remove myself from the situation, know that these lessons are valuable, know that he has their best interests at heart as well. Like it's not like he's wanting to harm them.
Yes, it's coming from the heart at his level of consciousness.
Exactly. So, that's been very, very helpful for me. And something else that popped into my head when you were speaking about the natural consequences was one Easter, Grayson, he was probably maybe 3 years old, and we were just like, you know what, you can eat what you want, go ahead and eat. And he ate so much junk food and he threw up twice. And it's, and he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. And he has since still made himself sick buy. Actually, we went to the movies, and the amount of stuff that Steve wants to get for them, like the candy, the hugest pop you can get, the popcorn, like everything. And he was throwing up in the bathroom like 2 or 3 times by the end of the movie. The next time we went, he's like, I'm not getting as much. So, I mean, you don't want to see your children go through these experiences. You just want to, love them and, have them avoid all these experiences, but that's not helping them in any way. They're not learning from that. He's really learning how to embody what he chooses by going through these experiences. We're not necessarily protecting them so much if we're not allowing them to have these experiences. Right. And that kind of just brought me to the whole school situation, like there's a lot that happens in a school. And we were removed from it for 3 years. And I've been really, really proud of my boys, for the way they've handled situations. And they've definitely come up challenging situations. And until I think that they are not safe, that's when I would step in and say, okay, it's time to remove you from that situation, at least for a period of time. But allowing them to have this experience has really shown me how proud I can be of them, shown me what they've learned and how they can handle challenging situations, even though I would rather just, have them home and not have to deal with all of that. That's
ideal.
Yeah. It was ideal
for us.
And it was ideal for years. I mean, it got to the point where it was like, okay, we need to remove you from this situation. And I'm so grateful for those years, because I think that time in their development and those years of us just being together really helped them to come to a point where they can handle these situations. I think if they were so immersed in it that whole time, then they wouldn't have the same skills. I mean, part of the reason I removed them was because their behavior was reverting, like their healthy choices were being, they were having a harder and harder time making the choices they were before. But so now it's a whole, seeing how they've grown, where they've come, what choices they're going to make now. So.
And watching your experience, it's been beautiful to see how this word has been dropping in a lot lately, lighthouse. Like they've become a lighthouse in that school system. And it's that 3 years of skill building, right? And confidence building and independence building that is, but it's allowing them to now experience what the benefit was of homeschool. So even if they might have been resisting things through homeschooling, this opportunity that they've had this last year in school, I've seen it. Like, I'm so proud of them, right? Like that they are now getting the comments that show that they are making these choices. They're able to handle these challenging situations. And that's so beautiful. But it is important to allow them to have the experience to put these things to test, to use, to practice.
Yeah, and definitely it's become challenging for Stephen, like at many times. And we've had the discussion, you can choose to stay home some if you want. Like, we can balance this out. You don't have to go 5 days a week if you don't want to, if you feel you need a break. He has a lot of challenges, or he has had a lot of challenges at lunchtime, where there's very minimal, if any, adult supervision. They're just left in the room, and, there's a lot of screaming and, this and that. And he talks about, all the things that are happening in there, and it's overwhelming for him. And I've said, you can choose to come home. Like, you have choice in this situation. You don't have to stay in it if you don't want to, but he wants to make change. He's like, I think they need consequences for their behavior. And, he was at a point where he was making lists for the teacher and letting them know who was doing what, and I'm like, that's a lot of responsibility for you, And so he's stopped doing that. But it was so challenging for him, but also it's making him realize that he does have choice in the situation. He has the choice to remove himself if he wants to. He doesn't have to get involved in other people's situations if they're not directly towards him. And if they are, he has the choice to ask them to stop. If they don't listen, he has the choice to go to an adult, and he's recently made some amazing choices in these situations by going to the staff and going to the principal and then choosing to call home and come home and remove himself from the situation because it was just too much. So that made me so very proud that he was taking those steps. Rather than just getting caught up in it and becoming so overwhelmed, because he can do that too. So this is giving him all of these experiences that I wouldn't necessarily, we could give him at home in a smaller dynamic and situation, between him and his brother. If there's challenges, we can still, but now he's immersed in this whole school system that is challenged. No teacher. Oh, I see a hand back there. I think the responsibility that's put on a single teacher is beyond the scope of any human being. So, he's in that situation where these adults, are just overwhelmed and can't even possibly do what's asked of them. So now it really falls on the child to make their own choices as well, healthy choices. So yeah, it's definitely been quite a learning experience. Times where I've just wanted to pull them right out, and times where I'm like, oh, I'm so proud. Like, I'm so happy you're making these choices for yourself. And when they go out into the world, on their own, they're going to have these experiences to fall back on, and the consequences of their actions. He's been in a situation where he has become extremely reactive. He actually punched a wall and hurt his hand at school once because he was so upset, and his hand was swollen for days, and that's a lesson for him there. I said, I hope you're going to learn and listen to your body, that wasn't a healthy choice. And moving forward, you can make some new choices. Again, like asking people to stop and then going to an adult to get help. And if they're not helping, you can always call home. And then I will be there to help you. So definitely been a learning experience, and I'm grateful for it. All of it, even though it's challenging at times.
Yeah, and you're offering your children that space, right? That's the biggest difference between how we are choosing to parent and how other generations have parented, right? And it wasn't that they were doing it wrong. It was just that was the only choice that they could see, right? So I think that's amazing that you're offering this space to your children so that they can see more than one choice, right? So that they see maybe two choices, and then maybe next time 3 or 4, or maybe they take a step back and it's 2, but that you're offering them that space, and that it's like, it's okay to come home if it's too much and it's 10 a.m. and it's already too much.
You can remove yourself.
Trust your body, right? Like trust. And I think that's so important. And we've been talking about this with like food and safety and everything. Trust your body. That's what it always comes down to, right?
Yeah. I like, there's so many important lessons I'm hearing in your story, Julie. Like, you're also teaching him to let go of control. Remember, he was trying to control it, and it was so much responsibility, and that didn't feel good for him, right? But he gets to learn the experience.
Okay, well, he needs to take his hitch
control. Yeah, but he
and when we let go of control.
Right now.
Okay, well, he cannot. Okay, sorry guys, just give me like 2 minutes.
No problem. But letting go of control, like he's learning how letting go of control takes care of himself.
Yes. And I mean, that's such a huge lesson for all of us, as I know we've had these conversations before.
Hi, Jackson.
But definitely not trying to control the situation, and remember that our personal power is our own choice, and our own action. So,
and I think I was gonna say, I think about all the unlearning that we're doing around control, and like how, like, what a blessing, what a gift to give our children this lesson early on.
Yes.
And that the choice of taking care of ourselves first is actually feels better and is more important.
Absolutely.
And I just think, wow, like that's a profound gift in itself right there, that lesson. And he might not realize it until he's older, right? Just like we didn't realize how damaging it was to be trying to control.
Right, exactly. And, it always comes down to, in our conversations, that, our only power is in our choice and our actions. So unless someone is, and this is the conversation we have, unless someone is physically assaulting him, verbally assaulting him, or vandalizing his property, that's when you need to stand up and take action, right? And, and there's a healthy way to do that too. You could start screaming and swearing at someone.
Sure.
Or you can choose to use your words respectfully and tell them to stop, sternly. And if they don't listen, then you get help. You move to the next level and you move to the next level. So this is definitely being practiced a lot. And I think it's so valuable for him. And it's a valuable lesson to be reminded of for me, constantly, like not trying to control.
Yeah, it's a good reflection for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Like that was so profound in what you were talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, we can keep learning, like, as adults. That lesson is so valuable to us, especially because it's so ingrained in us to control what's outside of us, right?
And I've really been experiencing this lately, again with my family and with the whole rules, and they joke and they call me Julie Ruly and stuff like that. And I'm like, I just want to have a healthy structure and a healthy balance, but then where do I release control?
Yeah.
And where do I, step back in? And again, it's the health and the safety, and even figuring out the balance between that is a challenge, right? Because it's like, okay, they're having all this junk food all the time. That's not healthy for them, right? It's not safe for their body. But am I allowing them to continue making these choices and learn from the natural consequences of it?
Yeah.
Or am I stepping in and being like, okay,
stopping it before it
right? And then so it's definitely a challenge. Or
that challenge.
So I was just gonna say the same with the electronics. It's the same thing. Yeah. I know how detrimental it is to our brain. Yeah. Do I allow that to continue, or do I control that and for their health and their safety?
Right? That is exactly why these conversations started. That challenge that you're talking about is exactly why Natalie and I decided to do this. And it's because as you awaken, you also find out about distortions in what we've learned about what's right and wrong and about what's healthy and safe, maybe, right? Even that's what's just coming in now as you're talking. It's like, that's the challenge, because sometimes it's like, well, because I think this is unhealthy because of what I know, is it actually, I don't know, or is this an opportunity for them to grow, to learn? I don't know. And that's where it's hard as moms, as we awaken, because then it's like, well, now what do I do? I already wasn't consistent before. Like, now what do I do? And then you add a partner into the mix who, like you said, is passionate about giving them this experience. And it's like, man, but you're undoing those experiences. So it's so challenging. And that's why I think grace is so important. And Natalie was saying, we have to have grace with ourselves. This is not easy.
Right. And, you just reminded me, having the clear communication with our partners as well is so important. And learning how to do that can be quite a challenge at times. Steve and I have grown exponentially in that clear communication and support of one another. And, that's a whole nother dynamic of supporting each other in our choices and our decisions. And the children see that. And, if we are not supportive of one another, that brings in a whole new dynamic with the children and everything. Like, oh, well, I have one parent who thinks this is correct, and I have another parent who thinks this is correct. Who am I going to side with? Who am I going to agree with? So we've had a lot of conversations, with the kids. It feels like almost daily about healthy choices and healthy food choices and electronics. And for a long time, Steve didn't really see my point of view at all, especially with the electronics. But through a lot of communication, he's come to a point, and through the natural consequences of it, I guess, because, I would say, look at their behavior. Look at the behavior when they've been on electronics for a long period of time, and then look at their behavior when they're off of it. You can sometimes see it super quick. Yeah, like they become more reactive. They start using disrespectful language. They are bored, constantly bored if there's no electronics in front of their face.
Yeah.
And then take that away, because, as you know, I've taken electronics away for months at a time. I mean, we didn't even have internet until I think Stephen was in grade 3 or something. He's in grade 7 now. We didn't have, television. We only had like some rabbit ears or whatever. So we'd get TVO Kids and stuff like that, that we'd watch once in a while. They didn't have tablets for a really long time or anything like that. Now it's just like, I feel like it's bombarded in my house. So it's setting those healthy limitations. But when I take the electronics away for a month, it's amazing how they're no longer bored. Yet for a while, of course, it takes an adjustment period, but the creativity that comes out of them, the activity that comes out of them, I'm always so amazed and so grateful to see it. And even now, like trying to find that balance. So we're constantly making new rules or schedules behind this. So as of right now.
Hi, Natalie.
Natalie,
Natalie, you've changed.
Yeah, so trying to set those healthy limitations and boundaries, as well as giving them the experience and learning from their own, experience is definitely a challenge. It's going back and forth, but we're always learning and we're always changing, right? And that's the thing that they're learning as well, that, we can try something, and if it doesn't seem to be
that's a valuable lesson.
Oh, wow, dude, let me see.
That is a valuable lesson, that it can change. Like, we don't have to, this isn't set in stone, because that's the thought, the ego will jump in and tell them that if you say yes to this, if you agree to this, it's going to be that way forever.
Right.
And it's like, no, that's a really valuable lesson.
Yeah, we've had many experiences of, household rules and stuff like that. And then, we switch them up, and just finding our balance and what feels good for all of us, because, it can't just be what feels good for one. No. It needs to be the balance for all of us as well. So, and
that's what I think conscious parenting is. Conscious parenting is giving that space. And it's giving that space, you were talking about it, to your partner too. Mm-hmm. It's giving that space to your partner to voice their, why they're making the choices that they're making, right? So that you can collaborate. And you were saying the importance of communication. It's so important for us to communicate, but we can't do it if we're not allowing space for feelings, because we can't communicate through the feelings while the feelings are heightened, right? So we have to give space for those feelings to be felt, that energy to move through us, through everybody involved, and then to be able to come back together and talk about it and not avoid it, because we were taught avoiding it, right?
Anyway. Sometimes, at the beginning with Steve, and I'm pretty sure you may remember this, Angie, but our communication, the way we really were able to open our communication without becoming reactive, was to text each other. We would text each other. Because then we weren't right together, and we wouldn't get cut off. We wouldn't see the other person's reaction. It was very, very helpful for us to each get out what we were thinking and feeling without becoming reactive to each other. And then, in the beginning, actually, it started with me just writing him letters. Like, I would, if there was an argument in the morning and he would leave for work, And I realized now I'm reactive with my children all day because I have this going on in my head. I'm not being the parent that I want to be. It has nothing to do with them, but they're having the consequences, what can I do? So I would literally just write out a letter to him, and sometimes I'd give it to him. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I'd leave it there and say, you can read it if you want to. But that was really the beginning of me being able to communicate to him. And even if I just got it out of me, it helped me to go on with my day, even if he had never read it. And a lot of the time he said he would read it, and whether I got a response or not, it still helped to get that out. And that opened up a communication between us where then he started to write back, like we could text each other back. So, and now we can have, healthy adult conversations, which I didn't even think was possible before.
That's incredible. And there's no attachment to outcome. That's beautiful. What you're saying, like whether he reads it or not, that's okay. You've gotten it out, right? And it's there for him if he wants it. And that's a beautiful example of giving that space again for him and his choice, right? Mm-hmm. It's honoring everybody's choice and honoring everybody's path in all of this.
Yeah.
But still taking care of yourself by doing that for yourself. And I think that's like, what a beautiful example. Thank you. I hate to cut this short, but my laptop's about to die and the plug isn't here and I have to go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you said that right at 101.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Oh yeah, right. Okay, I was like, it's not 101 yet. What?
No.
I know 101. I get it.
Like what?
Oh,
thank you so much, ladies. This was such a great conversation.
This was amazing. Yeah, it was so nice to see you guys again. So for everybody watching, Angie and I are going to do this on weeknights. We'll figure out which new day, and then she'll post it on the group.
Yeah, and our next topic is going to be forgiveness. Big topic for mom. So Julie, if you want to join us, you can join us.
I would love to. It's so fun.
I love, yeah. The more I love having people in conversation with us. All right. Okay. I love you guys. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day. Yes.
Happy Mother's Day.
All you badass moms out there, you guys are awesome. Remember that every day.
Yes, you are doing awesome things.
Yeah, you're doing great things.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Bye, guys.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you.
You too.